I bought the old Ironwood Ranch because I wanted silence. Real silence. The kind that seeps into your bones and forces your shoulders to relax for the first time in 20 years. A silence that felt like therapy after 2 decades wearing a badge. I had seen enough sirens, drunks, and idiots with more attitude than sense to last 3 lifetimes. And the simple truth was, I was burned out. Done. 90 acres in Benton County felt like redemption. A stretch of rolling hills and dense pine thickets where the loudest noise was the wind running through the tall pines, or the crunch of my own boots in the grass. I spent the first year pouring myself into the land, rebuilding the barn with my own hands, coaxing life back into the old garden, clearing the pond, and fixing the sagging porch. Every board creaked the way I liked. Every nail driven felt like driving out a bad memory. My deed was older than anyone's mortgage in the county, and my land had never been touched by any homeowners association. I finally slept like a man who didn't know anyone anything. Then they built the Sovereign Hills Estates. It happened fast. One morning, I woke up, and half the horizon had sprouted these identical, oversized 2-story homes, each one a monument to bad taste and new money. They had a massive stone gate, a pretentious logo with a stylized knight, and a tagline like, "The Sovereign Hills, Community Integrity." It looked like a luxury magazine spread advertising a life I actively tried to escape. I didn't mind at first. Zoning is zoning, and my life was contained within my own fences. I figured those new residents, the lawyers and stockbrokers and tech company execs, wouldn't spare a second glance for an old hermit running an organic farm next door. I was wrong, dead wrong. The first sign was a feeling, that little prickle on the back of your neck that tells you you're being watched. Then came the tangible proof, a white golf cart, shiny and new, creeping along my fence line one morning. 2 people inside, matching polos, matching visors, pointing at my ancient tractor and my goat pens like they were charting the topography of a hostile nation. They had some kind of emblem stitched on their sleeves, that same pretentious knight crest. I waved, a friendly, slow farmer wave. They didn't wave back. They just stared, then drove on, taking in the landscape like they were inspecting a particularly dirty zoo enclosure. I tried to shrug it off and got back to mucking stalls, but the feeling lingered. A few days later, I heard it, the unmistakable, high-pitched buzz of a drone. When you've spent years working around specialized police equipment, that sound hits you differently. It's the sound of intent. The drone skimmed over my driveway, hovered above the barn for a long moment, then drifted back toward the gated community. It felt like a deliberate probe, testing the wire. The surveillance escalated. More carts, more people in matching olive green security gear. They'd stand near the fence, whispering, sometimes taking notes on small pads. One afternoon, I found a guy kneeling right near my original property marker, poking at the stone with a stick as if trying to challenge its legitimacy. When I yelled a simple, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" he scrambled back into a waiting cart that zipped away before I could even get a good look at his face. They were acting like children, but children with expensive toys and a sense of entitlement. The day everything finally boiled over started like any other. I was in my workshop, the deep shying of my sharpening stone a familiar comfort, when I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel outside my property boundary. Then, the crunching kept going, right onto my land. I stepped out, blade in hand, and saw a man in a dark green HOA security uniform walking straight toward my barn door, a camera in his hand, snapping pictures of every piece of equipment I owned. He didn't notice me at first. Or maybe he did, and simply didn't care. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously level. He jumped, startled. He was young, maybe early 20s, wearing that uniform like a costume. "Sir, we are conducting a perimeter integrity inspection. Your agricultural machinery is exposed and therefore categorized as a potential hazard. HOA directive requires we document anything within the zone of concern." "The zone of concern," I repeated. I took a slow step forward. "That's fascinating vocabulary for a trespasser. Let me introduce you to the zone of concern that starts right here, where your left boot is currently standing. I am Dean McNamara, the owner of this ranch, and I'm asking you, politely, to step off my private property immediately." He straightened his vest, trying to look taller. "We are the Sovereign Hills Civilian Patrol, authorized by community leadership to monitor adjacent properties for safety issues. Listen to me, son. I said, and the old cop voice came out, that low, certain tone that ends all negotiation. Out here, you are not authorized to do a damn thing. I don't belong to your club. I don't recognize your authority. You have 5 seconds to step back over that fence line before I call the actual sheriff. He backed away slowly, mumbling something into a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. I pulled out my phone and called Sheriff Lawrence Wells. Wells picked up right away, heard the synopsis, and promised to head over. 10 minutes later, the whole Sovereign Hills patrol had vanished, green vests and golf carts and all. Wells arrived, found nothing but the tracks on the gravel, and wrote up a standard trespass report. He swore to notify the HOA board directly that the next offense would lead to arrests. I knew this wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't just nosy neighbors. People don't wander onto private farmland with cameras unless they think they have a right to do so. And someone in that gated community was feeding them that sense of false authority. Someone over there believed they had a claim to more than just their pristine, 2-story homes. They believed they had a claim to my land. Round 2 arrived the very next morning. I was at the west gate when a gleaming white SUV, the kind only new money bothers to maintain, rolled slowly up my driveway. It stopped exactly where the paved drive met the dirt, like the driver didn't want the tires touching anything imperfect. Out stepped Karen, the Duchess, Thorne, the HOA president herself. Beige linen, oversized sunglasses, and the clipboard, always the clipboard, tucked to her chest like a holy relic of bureaucracy. She approached the gate with that tight-lipped smile, the kind that pretended to smell flowers but was actually smelling manure. "Good morning, Mr. McNamara," she announced, loud enough to suggest I was already deaf. "We seem to have had a misunderstanding. My team reported a hostile confrontation during a routine perimeter assessment. Your team trespassed on private land," I corrected. "We were performing a safety inspection," she snapped, chin lifting. Sovereign Hills Estates maintains a charter that includes monitoring adjacent undeveloped parcels for hazards or violations. We are simply maintaining community standards. "This is not an undeveloped parcel," I said, pointing at the barn. "This is a working farm, and your charter means less than nothing out here." She held up a document between 2 perfectly manicured fingers. "Actually," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "it does. This document grants Sovereign Hills Estates temporary jurisdiction over external perimeters, signed by the sheriff's office." I froze. I didn't believe her for a second, but my blood ran cold because I recognized the signature. Sheriff Macy, retired a decade ago, a man known for being easily influenced. She was using a forged, outdated document, believing I wouldn't know the difference. "You really expect me to buy this?" I asked. "It's all perfectly valid. Our residents are entitled to a certain quality of life, and frankly," her gaze swept dismissively over my land, "your structures appear unregulated, and we have received several odor complaints." I pulled out my phone. This conversation was over. Sheriff Wells picked up on the second ring. "Larry," I said, my voice heavy with controlled rage, "you want to come up here? Someone's showing me paperwork with your office's name on it, claiming authority over my property." Wells arrived in record time, the expression on his face telling me exactly what he thought of her impersonation. He took the paper from Karen, studied it for 10 seconds, and fixed her with a look that could turn water to ice. "This seal hasn't been used in 6 years, Ms. Thorne," he said, his voice quiet but devastating. "And this signature is from a sheriff who hasn't worked in this county for almost a decade. This is fraudulent. You have no jurisdiction here. None. You are trespassing." Karen blinked rapidly, her composure finally shattered. "There must be a mistake. With all respect, Sheriff, Sovereign Hills has standards. If we don't manage adjacent lands, who will?" "You're leaving," Wells said, cutting her off. "Now? Before I decide this is worth more paperwork." She spun on her heel, marching back to her SUV, her voice tight with venom. "This isn't over. Sovereign Hills will take appropriate steps. You're being unreasonable, Mr. McNamara." "Lady," I said, resting my hands on the top rail of the fence, "I don't have to be reasonable. I just have to be the owner." She drove off in a cloud of dust and expensive indignation. Wells sighed, watching the SUV disappear. "She'll wish she was done," he muttered. I knew he was right. I was dealing with a woman who thought money meant ownership, not just of a house, but of the environment around it. And I was done playing nice. I called up Elena Vargas, the sharpest land attorney in the region. Elena met me at the farm the next day, already wearing boots and ready to work. I showed her the fraudulent document. She didn't flinch. They went low, she said. We'll go legal. We need to hit them with documentation so hard they feel the concussion in their pristine kitchens. We drafted a blistering cease and desist letter and filed for an immediate temporary restraining order, TRO, in county court. The TRO was broad. It legally barred the HOA and its agents from entering, filming, monitoring, or flying any drone over my land. The judge, apparently, had a history of bad HOA run-ins, and the order was granted faster than expected. You don't need a shotgun, Elena said, handing me the signed papers. When you have a judge's signature. I had Sheriff Wells personally deliver the injunction to Karen's marble porch. I wanted zero ambiguity. For a week, it was quiet. Then, the drone fell out of the damn sky. I was mending a fence line when I heard the high-pitched whine stutter mid-air, wobble like a drunk hornet, and crash land straight into my pond. I fished it out with a rake, a high-end model, not cheap. Once the casing was dry enough, I pried it open and removed the SD card. This wasn't just evidence. This was the smoking gun. I plugged it into my laptop, expecting maybe a few grainy, low-res shots of my fields. What I got was a sickening, infuriating trove. Hours and hours of meticulously recorded footage spanning several weeks. The drone wasn't just skimming the perimeter. It was flying regular routes over my house, focusing on the barn, the animal pens. And then came the truly repulsive part. It had zoomed in on my kitchen window, recorded me stepping out of my truck, and, worst of all, captured clear footage of my friends' young kids playing by the pond when they'd visited. It was criminal surveillance, an invasion of privacy bordering on stalking. They were building a profile, documenting my daily life, waiting for me to slip up. I immediately forwarded the files to Elena. She was furious. This is a felony, Dean. This is beyond trespassing. This brings in state and potentially federal wiretapping and privacy statutes. If a minor is visible, that's a whole new level of trouble. We filed a motion to extend the restraining order and prepared a full-fledged civil suit, now backed by concrete, irrefutable video evidence. Then, the final piece of the puzzle walked right into my trap. It came as a late-night phone call. The caller ID was a local number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go, but the old instinct kicked in. The voice on the other end was low, cautious, and shaking. Mr. McNamara? That's me. My name's Tobias Vance. I used to work security for Sovereign Hills HOA. I think we need to talk off the record. I need you to understand, I didn't sign up for this. We met at a dimly lit roadside pull-off near the river. Toby looked like a ghost, mid-20s, wearing a faded hoodie and constantly looking over his shoulder. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in a week. I thought I was taking a job running traffic checkpoints, checking pool wristbands, he repeated, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. Karen, Miss Thorne, she told us you were a threat, that you were stockpiling chemicals, running illegal operations, and that we needed to build a case against you. Her words. And you believed her? At first, yeah. She's persuasive. But I flew the drone myself a few times. What I saw was a clean, well-run farm. I saw you composting. I told her we had nothing. She just said if we couldn't find violations, we should create pressure by escalating visibility. The constant golf cart patrols, the nonstop drone flights. She wanted you rattled, cornered. Why come forward now, Toby? His voice dropped to a whisper. Because she crossed a line. She started talking about trying to get your water use flagged by a contact at the state level. She said if we couldn't force you out, we'd bleed you out through bureaucratic fines. But that's not the worst of it. He leaned in, his eyes wide. Karen's not just doing this for the HOA. She's on the payroll of a developer, Sterling Group Development. She gets a bonus for every adjacent parcel that gets absorbed. She's been trying to squeeze you out so they can split Ironwood Ranch into luxury lots. There it was. The chilling truth. This wasn't about aesthetics or odors. This was about seizing land for profit, using the HOA structure and the illusion of law enforcement as a weapon. The drone that crashed? Toby added. The operator was Justin Marlowe, Judge Marlowe's son. She used the name for cover, figured people wouldn't question a judge's kid flying the drone. I stood there for a long time, the wind whipping around us, the silence now feeling less peaceful and more like the calm before a storm. This was a sophisticated, multi-pronged attack to manufacture grounds for my removal. Before Toby drove off, I gave him Elena's card and told him to write down everything he remembered: dates, payment logs, orders. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a criminal conspiracy. The final act began with the mail. An envelope from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Environmental Protection Division, EPD. A formal letter informing me that an anonymous citizen complaint had triggered a full-scale inspection of my property, alleging unlawful burning, improper disposal of waste, and potential contamination of my pond. Karen's bureaucratic kill shot. Elena wasn't surprised. They want to bury you in fines, real or fabricated. We have to preempt them. I immediately hired Dr. Serena Reyes, an independent environmental consultant out of Atlanta. She spent a full day on my property, taking water samples, inspecting every corner. When she was done, she didn't offer comfort. She offered facts. Your property is one of the cleanest private farms I've ever evaluated, she stated. I will have a notarized report for you tomorrow. 3 days later, the state EPD inspectors rolled up. I was polite, walking them through the property with Dr. Reyes' official report in hand. They were thorough, but their faces showed confusion. Then, a younger inspector pulled me aside, looking uncomfortable. We've seen a few of these complaints lately, Mr. McNamara, he whispered. All of them anonymous. All of them originating from the Sovereign Hills zip code. You're not the first. He confirmed they had started an internal investigation into the source of the repeated false reports and the illegal drone flights. The official EPD report arrived a few days later. No violations found. All systems compliant. All allegations unfounded. But the drone data, the forged document, and Toby's testimony had already been handed over to the district attorney's office. I knew it was coming, but the sight of Sheriff Wells pulling up to my gate in the pre-dawn quiet still hit me hard. He sat at my kitchen table, the early morning light cutting across the legal documents. The county DA is opening a formal case, he said, his voice flat. Charges are pending for unlawful surveillance, impersonation of law enforcement, criminal trespass, and forgery. He pushed a folder across the table. It contained the drone evidence, the FAA violation reports, and the chain of custody for the fake document. And there's more. Federal agencies are getting involved because of the wiretapping and privacy statutes. Ms. Thorne, he paused, closing the folder. A warrant was issued an hour ago. She's being arrested today. By noon, the news was local. Karen Thorne, the queen of the Sovereign Hills HOA, was taken into custody. The footage of her being let out of her immaculate home in handcuffs was brutal, her dignity gone, her arrogance replaced by shock. The investigation didn't stop with her. Subpoenas hit the HOA office. Financial records revealed her payments from Sterling Group Development. The whole story came tumbling out. She was a paid operative in a scheme to seize my land. And Justin Marlowe, the judge's son? He flipped immediately, signing a cooperation deal and handing over a voice memo from Karen, her voice venomous. If we can just make him crack, that land's as good as sold. That was the end. The state attorney filed conspiracy charges. The trial was swift. Once Justin Marlowe read his damning testimony and that voice memo was played, the jury didn't hesitate. Karen was found guilty on 4 counts, including falsification of public documents and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. The civil suit came next. We laid out every single trespass, every unauthorized flight, every dollar spent fighting her manufactured crisis. Elena was brilliant. The judge awarded me $785,000, damages, legal fees, and punitive compensation for the surveillance and emotional distress. Then, the true victory. The Sovereign Hills Estates HOA was dissolved by court order. The residents, horrified by the criminal conspiracy they unknowingly funded, had already begun petitioning to dismantle it. The judge simply formalized the collapse. I wasn't the only one she tried to control. I was just the first one who fought back hard enough to bring the entire rotten structure down. I didn't celebrate with a party. I just went home, walked the fence line, and listened. The pines stood quiet. The goats bleated. My land was mine again, not just in title, but in peace. But the story doesn't end there, does it? The question remains, what does it say about wealth and power when people believe they can use bureaucratic and legal systems, or even forge them, to steal a man's independence? Where do we draw the line between community standards and the fundamental right to be left alone on your own property? This was a fight for my ranch, but it was also a fight for the right to live independently, outside the walls of their gated control. Tell me what you think. If you were one of the homeowners in Sovereign Hills who bought into that dream, only to find your HOA president was a criminal, would you have joined a class action suit against her, or would you have just tried to forget the whole mess? Let me know your perspective in the comments below, and thanks for listening to the Siege of Ironwood Ranch.